A couple of years ago in March, I was travelling with my dad to tour a college that I would be going to in the fall. A couple of months before this, I had lost my grandma to Alzheimer's. Both her and my grandpa had very progressed Alzheimer's and dementia. My grandpa needed the support, so my mom was staying with him in a different state, while my dad and I flew to visit a school. We were on a plane and close to descending. I was feeling fine, not stressed, and listening to a podcast. My dad was across the aisle from me. I suddenly felt immense pain and pressure from within my jaw on the left side of my face. It was sharp, constant, and I felt like I needed to pop my jaw but couldn't move it at all. I had no idea what was going on and had never felt this before. I could only try to breathe through the pain and wait for it to pass. It took a couple minutes before it began to subside, but I was very scared. It occurred before and while the plane began to land. I considered it to be pressure related to the plane, but it was too localized and unique. I couldn't even turn my head to let my dad know something was happening to me. I was wondering if I was having some sort of seizure on the side of my face. After we landed, I considered trying to find a coffee stand to get a cup of ice to hold against my face, but no luck. Within an hour, it was gone. As we were driving to the school, my mom had let us know that my grandpa had passed. Between us getting off the plane and what time I imagine it took for my mom to gather herself to let us know, I believe this all happened within the same hour. I called her, and she believes that I felt pain as a signal of his death, which I believe as well. I found studies saying this isn't entirely uncommon, but I've struggled to find other personal stories like mine. Terms like empath, bereavement hallucination, and sixth sense came up when I tried to Google a possible term. Anytime I begin to feel strange pain at an intense level, I think of calling my loved ones to make sure everything's okay. Nothing like this has ever happened since. While I don't know what specifically was the cause of death for my grandpa at the moment, I wonder if it involved any similar pain to what I felt. I would love to hear any similar stories or thoughts on what happened to me. This happened on Shore AFB in 2005. My now ex-husband was an E6, and he worked nights on the F-16. I would be home overnight with our two sons, aged 5 and 2. First, I need to describe the house. It was a long hallway with rooms on either side. Partially open floor plan from the dining room to kitchen, where there was a half wall for part and then a whole wall. From my bedroom door, I could see to the back door straight through the dining room and part of the kitchen. We had a large rack by the back door where we stored dry goods. One morning, I was woken by a noise in the kitchen. I jumped out of bed, afraid my younger son was getting into trouble. I didn't grab my glasses, and without them, I'm legally blind. I can see colours and rough shapes, that's it. I looked toward the kitchen and saw what looked like a man in an Air Force uniform. Again, I can barely see, so I'm going off colour and shape. The figure is holding a box and facing the rack. Of course, I assume this is my husband, and I say, "Hey, you want me to cook you something?" The figure moves so that it's facing me. The box drops to the floor, and the figure moves to the part of the kitchen I can't see. So, my ex-husband was very unpredictable and emotionally volatile. So my assumption right here is that he's mad at me for something, and I'm going to need to deal with his attitude. I turn back to my night table and get my glasses. Then I walk to the kitchen. This entire action takes maybe 30 seconds. It is a small house. I'm talking as I walk to the kitchen. Did something happen at work? To diffuse the situation. No response. I turn into the kitchen and there's no one there. It wouldn't have been possible for anyone to get out the back door without me hearing it, because the door squeaked. Again, this was only 30 seconds, tops. I walk and glance through to the living room, which is also empty. Then I look at the time on the microwave, 6:17. My husband didn't get home until 8. Also, a box of Annie's mac and cheese was on the floor in front of the rack. This happened 16 years ago, and I still try to sort it out in my head. I do not believe in ghosts. I can say we had a few other uncomfortable incidents in that house. There were two bathrooms, a full one and then a small ensuite to the master bedroom, which was our older son's room. He refused to use the ensuite. He said it was creepy. One time, I was taking a shower in there and I saw movement outside the curtain. I glanced out, and I swear I saw a man in a uniform looking through the window, then dropping real quick. I screamed for my husband and he ran outside, and there were no footprints or anything. I ran a daycare out of our house, and occasionally we would hear stuff moving around in the daycare area, especially at night. That stopped after we got a dog, so I can't rule out South Carolinian giant water bugs playing with the pretend kitchen. I don't believe in ghosts or the paranormal, but I know what I saw and heard. I was wide awake by the time I was in the doorway and saw him, which rules out hypnagogia. I don't know what I experienced. I am okay without knowing. I thought this would be of interest for others though. I've not shared this story before. My grandfather died after a brutal battle with pancreatic cancer when I was 17. When I was 21, I became pregnant with my elder son. We lived in a tiny Section 8 apartment in a rural town and had little decoration. No familiar pictures at all. My son was born with a defect in his ears and didn't hear very well. We mostly communicate with signed English. Once he was around 1 year old, I would hear him at night chattering away. Couldn't understand what he was saying, but he would laugh and it really sounded like a conversation, appropriate pauses, etc. One day, my sister-in-law and I were sitting on the couch, with my son on my lap, as I showed her a memory book my mom had made for me for Christmas. On the second page were several photos of my grandparents and great-grandparents from both sides. They were labelled, but let me remind you, my son was about 14 months old. I flip to this page, he laughs, points at my maternal grandfather in his wedding photo, and as clear as anything says, "Look, Grandpa Bob." Yes, his name was Robert, and we called him Bob. As a bonus, my second son also chatted in his room at night. I asked him once who he was speaking to, and he said, "Gamma Ruth. She says she's sorry." My dad's mother was named Ruth, and she was a very unkind lady. I had no photos of her, and had never spoken about her. Even if I had, I didn't call her Ruth, just Grandma. I am an atheist, and I do not believe in the soul. I have no explanation for these occurrences. I leave my mind open, and if I ever have incontrovertible evidence, I'm willing to believe. I was 15 when I decided to start messing around with a Ouija board, because it was something the neighbourhood parents would drill into our heads to not play with. As kids, we were intrigued. It was my best friend, my neighbour, and myself, playing it one evening, when my neighbour thought it was a big joke and made fun of us for playing. He tried to light the Ouija board on fire, and it refused to flame. It just wouldn't burn at all. My best friend and I thought he was being crazy, but we didn't understand the severity it caused us. About a month later, I was sitting in my mother's room with my best friend and my little sister, listening to music, because my mother had the best sound system in the house and she was gone for the night. My sister was sitting on my mom's bed, my friend's back was facing the window, and I was facing my friend, but couldn't help but notice a blue man standing outside my mom's bedroom window. My friend saw my demeanour change, and when she looked out the window, I saw the colour drain from her body and she started to cry. I left my mother's room with my friend, and we locked ourselves in the only room without windows until my mom arrived home. We assumed it was a peeping Tom for the longest time after this. Now, fast forward to another 2 to 3 months after that happened. My neighbour called me and my friend in a panic, saying he needed to come over because it was an emergency. We told him to come over immediately, and he did. He explained to us that he and his friends, not the best group of individuals, but given their age, their decisions kind of make sense, unfortunately, decided to light an abandoned car on fire. He said he took a picture of it engulfed in flames to send to his friends as a joke saying, "campfire." When he revealed the photo to me and my friend, she again lost the colour in her body and started to cry. I immediately noticed in the blue of the flame that same blue man that was outside of my mother's bedroom window. I couldn't move, speak, or feel anything. He questioned us on what it was, and the only one who could make out words for us was my little sister as she told him, "That's the blue man that was outside my mum's window." So a few years ago, I was like 10 or 11. During one family gathering, my dad and his siblings, my aunts and uncles, talked about their past experience in their old house they were renting way back when they didn't have kids. They talked about this ghost kid that's in the house running around and making fun of them once in a while. And they keep talking about how the kid also lived in the same old house and died in the house, and the kid didn't receive a proper burial. Anyway, I didn't believe that this ghost kid existed until this experience of mine a few years ago. Me and my younger sister visited my cousin's house since we lived in the same neighbourhood. This cousin of mine was only 4 years old at the time. It was only me and my cousin, my younger sister and my aunt that was in the house. So we hung out and played until lunchtime. My aunt had to go out to buy us food, so me and my sister had to babysit our little cousin for a bit. And here's where it gets weird. We were in my little cousin's room. My younger sister was in the bathroom taking a dump. I realised that we forgot to turn off the TV because I can hear it from my cousin's room. So I went downstairs, turned off the TV, and went back up. But as I was heading into my cousin's room, I heard him laughing and giggling. So I assumed my sister was already done with her business and went back to my cousin's room. But when I went inside, there was no one else in the room but my cousin, giggling and facing a corner of the room. So I asked him, "Hey buddy, why are you laughing?" My cousin answered, "We were playing." And I said, "We?" And he didn't answer, and he just continued to giggle. So I carried him out of the room, and we went back downstairs with my little sister, and waited for my aunt to get back. For the past 2 years, there's been a tapping sound coming from my bedroom window. It started one Halloween night, and about a few times a month, sometimes more often, something taps at my window. There's nothing around to hit the window, and it sounds exactly like a finger tapping the glass. Me and my siblings are used to it. A few days ago, my brother started complaining that something was communicating to him from outside the den's window. Keep in mind, we live in an apartment complex, so we always have the blinds closed. He says that whatever it was just kept saying hello to him in a robotic, high-pitched voice. The rest of our family just shrugged it off. The day after, we go outside and there are small tracks leading up to all of our windows. I don't know what animal could have made those tracks, because I think it's bipedal. Later that year, I was in my room lying in my mind next to my window, blinds closed, and I jumped out of my skin. Someone's loudly banging against the glass, but I ignored it. I just assume it's one of my siblings sneaking up on me. I then find out that they were both together at that moment in the house while it happened. They hadn't been out for hours. The next night, my brother complained about the voice outside his window again, and we told him to ignore it. If it's something supernatural, we don't want to mess with it. Yesterday, while we were all preparing for dinner, my entire family and I heard the creature screaming outside. I was too shocked to move to grab my phone and record. It kept yelling, "Hello, come out," exactly how my brother had described. It was so loud, we could hear it clearly from the loud kitchen and dining room. We didn't want to look outside. This morning, more snow had fallen, but fresh prints were there. I was able to take pictures before they melted. I don't know what to make of any of this, but it's impossible for this to be a prank because of the lack of human prints in the snow. I'm going to keep my phone on me tonight so that I can record the creature talking if it comes by again. I'm pretty sure it will. So I'm a fresh nurse, just finished with school and hospital experience, and waiting to graduate. However, where I live, we're in a high demand of nurses, so you're allowed to work once you pass school. Anyway, I've been working at this clinic for a couple months now. It's a private clinic, so the interior basically looks like a house. It has a pharmacy, the doctor's office, and 2 other offices down the hall, a waiting room and a back room. So this starts about 2 weeks ago. I was called in to work a full day, meaning 7 a.m. to 8 p.m, because my other co-workers were tested positive for COVID. So I came in as usually, brought in my coffee, and sat down waiting for people to walk in. We didn't have any appointments that day, so I was just chilling. Then I heard scuffling in the back. At first, I thought it was the ceiling fan since it creaks from time to time, but the more I ignored it, the louder the sound got. I got annoyed and walked to the back, thinking maybe the dog got in. The doctor's house is attached to the clinic. But as I walked to the back, I got a feeling of dread, as if I continued walking something bad would happen. I stopped halfway down the hallway. I decided to let whatever was back there stay there. Now, I didn't think it was paranormal or anything. It was the last thing to cross my mind, actually. But then, it was around 6 p.m. on the same day. I was attending to a client, ringing up her medicine, when the box of aspirin at the top of the shelf just fell. It startled both of us, but again, I didn't think anything of it. I placed it back on the shelf the client left, and I sat back down, waiting for closing time. When closing time came, I remember I'd left my purse and sweater in one of the offices without thinking much. I went to the back to gather my stuff. As I gathered everything, I heard the door open and the chime went off, so I stepped out and called from the hallway, "Sorry, we're closed." There was no response. I walked out to check, but there was no one there, not a soul. I locked up the clinic and left for the night. The next day I came in and we were pretty busy with clients, so the events of yesterday didn't cross my mind. At 5 p.m, the doctor called it a day and left to go home. So I was all alone once again. I was on my phone scrolling on Instagram when the lights turned off. I thought about a great power outage, but as I looked up, I saw the lights in the waiting room were still on. I looked next to me where the switch was, and it was off. That's when I got a little freaked out, but I switched it back in and continued scrolling on my phone. I got up to use the bathroom and left my phone on the counter. When I came back, it wasn't there. I thought maybe I did take it with me, so I went back to the bathroom, but it wasn't there. I looked in the hallway where I'd walked to see maybe if it fell. No, there was nothing there. I remember thinking, am I really going nuts here? When I came back to the front, my phone was on the shelf, next to the bottle of aspirin. Loss of words, but stuff like that kept happening every day, until recently. My co-workers just got retested again, and one of them still has COVID, but the other one doesn't, so that means she comes in, and I get a few days off. On the day before I left for my day off, about 2 days ago, I was once again sitting at the front counter, reading a book this time. When I heard footsteps, wet footsteps coming from the back room, I thought enough was enough. I really thought someone was messing with me. I switched on the light to the back and peered in the room. No one was in there. I shook my head and turned to walk down the hallway, but I stopped. Down the hall were visible, wet footprints. It was as if someone was following me. I closed up early, took my crap and went home. I got back in tomorrow and I'm convinced there's something haunting my workplace. These are just some of my experiences. I have many more from when I was in the hospital. A number of years ago, I awoke after an afternoon nap to an unexplained shadow near the edge of my bed. It seemed strange, but I didn't think it was something paranormal initially. I sat up slightly and began to look around the room for what could be casting the shadow, thinking I'd find a jacket hanging in front of a light source. I found nothing. I sat and looked at it a bit longer, and then had the realization there was no way a shadow could be suspended in the air like that. It was not cast against a wall or object. It was just sticking into the air, coming up from my bed. At this point, I was completely bewildered. It was a formless mass with no discernible features. I couldn't figure it out and decided I'd have a smoke whilst I continued to look for an explanation. As soon as I shifted to reach for my cigarettes, the shadow moved. As soon as it moved, I could make out its rough shape. The initial movement was its head raising from a slumped position. Its head then turned and looked at me. As soon as it saw me sitting wide-eyed staring at it, it jumped to its feet and ran away, straight through my bedroom wall. This shadow person had sat on the edge of my bed and seemingly fell to sleep. It's the most surreal thing I've ever experienced. The entire thing played out in about 60 seconds. I've never had anything like this happen to me before or since. I was going through some stuff at the time, and my doctor said it was likely some form of hallucination, but I'm really not sure. Has anybody else had something like this happen? I've read many stories about ghosts and shadow people since, but never heard anything similar to my experience of a sleeping shadow. Every house I've ever lived in has had some strange characteristics that came with them. When I was a child, the house I lived in had a little bear that came with it. The rental house I lived in, before moving into my current house, frequently felt freezing in the washing room, even when the washing room and dryer had been on all day, and waking up to rattling in the bathroom happened a lot. My current house had been the only one without anything weird or suspiciously paranormal happening, until around last year when I got back from a camping trip. My brother was staying with me at the time, and I just ended a serious relationship and needed support. My brother slept in the lounge and I slept in my room, but that night was probably the scariest night I've had. I woke up after a pretty weird dream about being chased by a rabid animal. And when I turned to face the ceiling, there was a woman clinging into my ceiling like in a classic horror movie. Sticking to the ceiling was a pile of bones in the shape of an 8, and there were scratch marks everywhere. I just stared at that for a while before my pet started drinking water really loud, and the girl on the ceiling, and she snapped her neck to look at me. My first instinct was to just lay on my side and force myself to sleep through whatever was happening. My brother told me the next morning that he slept great and had no idea what I was talking about. Since then, the exact same thing has happened at least once a month, and I'm really looking for what she is or what she's doing, etc. When we die, what happens? Do we just cease to exist? The answer is no, for one reason. Where were you before you became? Think back to when you were a child and try to remember. Wasn't there a day that it all began? A day that you woke up and thought, where am I? No matter who you are, you don't remember being a baby. You don't remember until a certain age, and I believe because that's when you finally gain consciousness. You see, you've lived before, and thus you will live again. When you die, I believe seeing is how time is made by mankind and does not exist. When you pass on, your soul energy moves from your body and travels to another reality where you enter the body at the same age that you finally gain consciousness as a child. We have deja vu because subconsciously we retain memories like an imprint on our soul, so that in our next life we can do things differently without realizing we are. Have you ever even once thought, wait, I have a feeling I should not do this or go there? That's your subconscious memories from your past life. So the point I'm making is that death is irrelevant and does not exist due to death being man-made as well as the psychological aspect. We cannot measure death by the body because we are the soul energy and our body is just a vessel. I work with kids, so I'm pretty substance-free and sound mind. The man who killed his 2 dogs and himself in my house is still here. The dogs too. A German Shepherd and a Malamute. It's a backstory. Got the house cheap because of its history of a very gory previous owner's suicide. He'd also attempted to murder somebody during his mental breakdown, but I do not know the details. He was a nice person that had no mental health support, and decided to kill his beloved dogs and himself. I thought it was horrible. But man, I needed a place to live ASAP. So I braced myself against superstition or the creeps. The weirdness started immediately. Pounding and moaning like the house is being hit by a bulldozer. Neighbors can hear it from outside sometimes. Huge dogs howling from somewhere inside the house. Bedroom doors opening and closing. Footsteps through the kitchen hallway every night at 4 a.m. It's nerve-wracking, but also sad. More than once, I've awakened thinking my house is being broken into. Sometimes, I feel somebody sitting on my bed, and more than once I've had my quilt put on top of me. This quilt is in my closet, so it had to be carried out and placed on me. Then I started seeing the dogs. Walking across my bedroom carpet and standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. Startling the heck out of me because I don't have a GSD or a Malamute. I have a Sheltie with an overbite that can only make noises. My own dog, Kelly Barkson, went crazy at the ghost dogs, and I ran all over the house making sure it was really spirits. Kelly now sleeps under the covers with me. We see their fluffy D-cells and watch them disappear into the closet. I don't think he's a bad spirit, and the dogs are certainly innocent. Often things go missing, and I'll ask him and the dogs to help, and the missing things reappear in totally odd locations. Like my lipstick showing up in the freezer, or my headphones under my dresser. This first experience happened about 2 months ago. My fiancée and I were hanging out together because she was off that day, and we had a lot of running and movement in the bushes and trees next to our small house. So I went into my porch with a flashlight to see what was up. I'm still hearing the sounds, but not seeing anything, so I just brush it off and go back inside. Well, the next day, she tells me her grandpa heard stuff too, and saw 2 glowing red eyes in the trees. He tells her whatever it was taller than him, and he's about 60. I hear scraping on my metal roof, which I suppose could be tree branches, but the times I hear it, there's no wind. A few times I've heard light tapping on the side of my house. Sometimes I think I hear voices outside, but I'm always watching stuff on my phone or playing a video game, so I always try to brush it off as me just hearing things. My grandfather has a dog who roams around the property at night when he forgets to bring him in or falls asleep. Fluffy has been barking randomly at night sometimes for a few minutes to a few hours. A few nights ago, I let my dogs out to use the bathroom. I have 2 leads for them because I can't trust them not to run off. I notice while I'm getting my St. Bernard off lead that my husky is staring up at the driveway at something I can't see. A few seconds later, she just starts cowering like she's scared and ends up peeing where she is, so I yell at her to go inside, which she does, and I start taking her lead off, when I notice Fluffy race up the driveway and start barking, so I book it inside. My husky immediately ran into her kennel and wouldn't come out the rest of the night, not even for a treat or my fiancée whom she adores. That day after the incident with my husky, I again let the dogs out. As I'm letting my dogs back in, I noticed 2 red glowing dots through my neighbour's fence that's about 30 feet away, and from the positioning, I can tell they're 4 to 5 feet off the ground. I try not to freak out and do my best to calmly get my dogs back inside, where I almost have a panic attack. This was at 7:30 p.m. My fiancée got home about 11 p.m, where I gained the courage to go back out with my dogs, where the lights still were. When I went to investigate the next day, they were gone, and that night, no lights. Yesterday, I let both my dogs out again, and was out there for a few minutes when my fiancée came rushing out and asked me if I'm okay. I got freaked out and told her to stay outside with me, where she tells me how quiet it is and how she's getting a bad feeling. That's everything I can remember at the moment. I don't know what's happening, and I honestly feel as if I'm going crazy. If anyone has any answers or similar experiences, please leave a comment. I'll answer any questions as best I can. I'll preface this by saying I've never seen a ghost. I believed in them in my youth and had been rather agnostic about my beliefs for a long time, simply believing that anything could exist. The older I got, however, the more skeptical I got. This happened last night, and I can now firmly say I'm a believer. My friends and I were in a local park last night. We were walking along a trail, and right away, something was off. One of my friends has always seen the paranormal, and he was extremely uncomfortable. He was seeing figures and hearing footsteps throughout the extent of the walk. My other friend and I could not hear or see anything out of the ordinary, so we kind of laughed it off and said he was just scared, which I now regret. It wasn't until we sat down at a tree that things took a turn for the worse. Both of my friends reported feelings of cold dread washing over them that I did not feel and assumed was anxiety. And then my ghost-seeing friend stared at the tree line. I asked him if he was seeing one, and he said yes. I looked into the woods, and I saw it. It was a small, wispy figure. It had a white-grey coloration and seemed to be made out of a smoke or mist. It was in constant fluid motion, inverting into itself as if it was barely staying visible. It would bend from just a smoke ball to a small humanoid figure. Not childlike, just small, and it would wave. I pointed at it and asked my friend if it was between the two trees. He said yes. I described what I was seeing. He said, "Oh my God, you see it too." We ran out of there after that. I felt the same dread my other two friends felt, and I couldn't shake the feeling for the rest of the night. That's all I can think about now. What was that? It didn't feel like a dead person. It didn't feel like a person at all. It also didn't feel mocking, but it felt like it was trying to act in a way that was abnormal for it. I don't know. I'm coming to you all as an ex-skeptic begging for answers. My friend and I both saw the same thing, and all three of us felt the same thing. It was the day before Christmas in 2009, and we were all on the road, leaving my dad's quiet ranch in Tequesquite, Mexico, and headed to Mexico City. We had been on vacation in Mexico for about a week already, and planned on staying for another week or so. Me, my mom, my dad, my sister Beth, and my cousin Jazz were all headed to my aunt's house to visit for 3 days, and to drop off some things we brought from them for the US. Our first day there went great. We had fun talking, eating, and playing games. I'd always been an animal lover, so when I saw they had a little chihuahua, I instantly wanted to play with him. But when I got close, it would run to the top of the stairs and just stand there, looking at me. So I figured it was a weirdo, and left it alone. When night came, we all went to bed. Our aunt put the dog out on the roof patio, like she apparently did every night, and my mom, dad, and I went upstairs to the guest room. Beth and Jazz were downstairs on the living room couch. The part of the story is told from my sister's perspective, as I wasn't there. Because she couldn't sleep, my sister stayed up playing on a Nintendo DS. Around 3 o'clock, there was a scraping sound coming from across the room at the dining table. She looked over and watched for a while, when something happened that made her want to shit her pants. One of the dining chairs pulled away from the table, so far it was about 3 feet away. Then she heard the sound of someone going through the pots and pans in the kitchen. And because the kitchen was around the corner, she couldn't see what was going on. Needless to say, she didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, she told us what happened, and of course, my parents blew it off like all parents do. But Jazz and I believed her. Me and my sister had been through enough for me to know that she was being serious. So that night, my sister and Jazz squeezed themselves into the small guest room with us. I was on the small couch in the room, my parents were on the bed, and laying on the floor smashed like a couple of sardines was Beth and Jazz. That night at 3-ish in the morning, of course, I had to pee. Scared from the story my sister told, I didn't want to go alone. I begged them to come with me, so the three of us, Beth and Jazz and me, walked down the dark hall to the bathroom. We took turns using the toilet, while the other two looked at the door, praying not to see someone walk by or something. When we were done, we opened the door to go back to the room, and we saw him. That weird little dog was standing in the hallway watching us. I don't know how long we stood there, but eventually it walked away, going around the corner to the stairs and never breaking eye contact with us. The second we couldn't see it anymore, we ran. Beth and Jazz threw themselves under their blankets while I hurried to close the door, but not before making eye contact with a small dog standing at the top of the stairs. The next day, me, Beth and Jazz were practically crying, begging my dad to take us back to the ranch. But he was never the type to believe in ghosts, aliens, or anything supernatural really. So of course he just laughed and said no. In fact, he decided to stay a few days more. And when we asked our aunt about the dog, she assured us she had locked it out on the roof patio like usual. For days we would hear things outside our room. The sound of little kids running down the hall, things that sounded like bowling balls getting pushed down the stairs. And if I dared to peek outside the room, that dog at the top of the stairs watching us. Finally, the day came when we had one more night. Just one more night to endure before we would finally leave. But of course, it turned out to be the most traumatic. In the middle of the night, while the three of us sat up listening to the sounds of kids running and bowling balls getting pushed down the stairs, it suddenly stopped. We watched as something big stood right outside our bedroom door. And slowly, so slowly, the doorknob started to turn. Beth and Jazz hugged each other, shutting their eyes tight, and through tears started to pray. I was frozen, unable to look away as whatever was on the other side was about to come in. Finally, the doorknob was turned all the way. Beth and Jazz were practically screaming out their prayer as they sobbed, and I felt like I was about to throw up. When suddenly, my mom sat up and yelled, "Would you all just shut up?" and then laid back down and went to sleep. All was quiet. Even the doorknob had snapped back into place, and whatever was on the other side of the door was gone. The three of us looked at each other, saying nothing, and for the rest of the night, nothing happened. The next morning, we all but flew down the stairs and put our bags in the car. My parents said their goodbyes and got ready to hit the road. I sat in the car waiting to leave. I wasn't about to go back in there. Looking at the house, I could see the dog, standing up there on the patio, looking down at the car I was sitting in. I never wanted to kick a dog so bad in my whole life. A few minutes later, Beth and Jazz came running out with some news. After telling our aunt about the nights we had, she just laughed and said, "Oh, I forgot to tell you. Your late grandfather died on that couch you slept on your first night here. He's not really friendly to people sitting on his couch, but we see and hear him around the house almost every night. Nothing to be scared of." I didn't even know how to process that information. And how do you just forget to tell your guests about the ghost in your house that's possessed by a specific couch in your home? Not to mention, according to my dad, he later found out that the house was built on top of several graves. But he still thinks it's just a coincidence. It's been 13 years so far, and this is still the worst paranormal experience I've ever had. But sadly, it wasn't for my sister. This story happened a few years ago. I lived in a building with my daughter who grew attached to my neighbour's husband, as if he were her dad. One day, while talking with my neighbour's wife, my daughter, 2.5 years old at this time, came running to the door. But rather than running into my neighbour's apartment to go cuddle up to Teddy, she froze at the doorway. She told his wife and I that we needed to be quiet, as Teddy was sleeping. Teddy was not sleeping. He was in fact sitting on the couch watching TV. Teddy stood up and called for my daughter to come see him. Again, my daughter looked at his wife and I and told us that Teddy was sleeping and that we needed to be quiet. I could see she was getting upset at the fact that we were laughing while telling her that Teddy is awake and wants you to go sit with him. Teddy started approaching the doorway where we were standing. My daughter began to cry and ran into our apartment screaming, "No, Teddy is sleeping." I could feel the goosebumps running across my body. The same day, my daughter went to a relative's place for a sleepover. I'd invited my neighbours to come over for a bit. Teddy came over and explained how he wasn't feeling the best and how he was breathing in and out of a paper bag before coming to my apartment. I insisted to go to the hospital to make sure he was alright. On the way, Teddy fell ill and asked to pull over so he could be sick on the side of the road. As he was kneeling beside the car, Teddy suffered a major heart attack and passed away while on the way to the hospital. When the service was held for Teddy, I had such a strong feeling that I had to bring my daughter with me. She brought her favourite blanket with her, of course. When my daughter and I got to the funeral home for the viewing, we were greeted by everyone in Teddy's family. They all knew who my daughter was, as Teddy used to talk about her all the time. I held my daughter close as we walked up to the casket where Teddy laid. My daughter leaned down almost as if she was going to whisper to him. She then told me that Teddy was sleeping and that he was really cold. She took her blanket and tucked Teddy in, then looked at me and said how he was happy and warm now. That night, as I sat alone in the living room, my phone began to ring. 4.5 rings later, and still no name appeared. I quickly answered the phone in the middle of a ring, only to hear the dial tone. The call didn't even show up as an incoming call afterwards. I felt like Teddy called to say goodbye to us. It was so strange that my daughter knew there was something wrong with Teddy before anything ever happened. A few months later, we went to go visit my grandmother who was passing away from pancreatic cancer. My daughter refused to enter my grandmother's room. She kept saying how my grandmother was sleeping and that everyone should leave her to go to sleep. I instantly began to cry. Only 4 days later, I got the call that my grandmother had passed away in her sleep. Here's a list of some creepy things I've experienced. One was when I was a child of around 8. It was a summer's day and I was playing in my scooter near a road. I walked past a house and the door was slightly cracked open. I saw what appeared to be a really weird red devil face looking at me through the bottom of the door. It didn't look human, but it didn't exactly creep me out. Maybe it was another child, or maybe I imagined that one. I don't know. 2, I was around 14 years old. I was in my bed relaxing and trying to go to sleep around 1 a.m. and I saw this thing peek around my door. It had just a blackness for a face and looked like it was wearing a hood exactly like a monk. It had long pointy fingers that bent around the door from like it was grabbing on. I ran into my mum's room, shitting myself, and woke her up. The next day, she asked my auntie, who's a medium, to find out what happened. Apparently, the thing I saw was a monk called Samuel, and she said he was a good spirit and a protector, etc. My entire estate was built around an old monastery for monks. 3. The last one, I was 19 in my house, different to the house above, who I lived in with my friend, and we were getting ready to go out into town. I was in the bathroom having a pee, and I shouted her name. She called me from her bedroom and told me to come up. I was walking up the stairs to her room, and it was quite dark, only the lights from the streetlights outside. I saw my friend in her room wearing what looked like a black dress. She kind of skipped and jumped out and then went behind the door. I went into her room, turned the light on, and asked her why she'd changed clothes. When I went to look behind the door, no one was there. I shouted her again, freaked out, and she answered from the bathroom where she was. 4. This is one I've just remembered now. So this occurred in the same house as the previous story. This house had an incredibly eerie vibe to it, especially on the middle and top floor. As soon as you went up the stairs, it kind of felt you were cut off from the world. It was just really uneasy. I was laid in bed with my dog once, and she started going weird, looking around, pointing back, scratching on the wall, etc. Then the curtains just blew in, as if a strong gust of wind blew them, but the window was shut. There were other things also, like random creaking, hearing pennies dropping on the floor of the room above me, which was wood, and cupboards banging when me and the dog went up to bed. My mother and uncles, when they were all kids around 9 to 15, I think, played with the Ouija board. Now back then, when they were kids, it was advertised as a fun game, and kids would get one for Christmas or their birthdays. They would go to my grandparents' basement and play it, thinking of it as a stupid game. One time, when they were playing with it, a spirit or demon whose name was Amy and age 7 started cussing my mother out, like calling her a bitch or telling her to fuck off. But one thing is, they didn't take it seriously, therefore they didn't say goodbye or play it properly. My uncles were playing it by themselves one time and came running upstairs and refused to tell anyone what happened or what the board said. They ran outside and threw it in a dumpster behind Burger King, thinking that's the last of it all. I think that made the spirits connected to the board mad. And then the next day, when my uncle was going to school, he looked behind the Burger King and the entire dumpster was burned and turned into ash. Back in 2014, my parents were downstairs at my grandparents' house, and my dad walked outside and sat down, and my mom came down a few minutes after him. When turning the corner after walking down the stairs, she saw some man sitting in a chair in the middle of the basement. He wore a black suit and had no face. She blinked and he was gone. After going outside with my dad, before she had the chance to say anything about the man, my dad told her he saw a man sitting there when he looked back, thinking it was her looking at him. They both saw the exact same ghost or entity that night. Fast forwarding to now, I live in my grandparents' house, the same one they played at years back, and this basement is surely haunted by something. When leaving my room a few months ago, I looked behind me and saw a little figure of a girl standing behind my bed. She didn't say anything. Then again, I ran before she could. I sometimes hear things or see shadow figures in the basement, but I try to ignore them. I still think this is all happening because of what my uncles and mother did over 40 years ago. I live on a reservation. I'm Lakota, Native American, and there's quite a bit of superstition again amongst our culture, which is normal. There's all kinds of stories told to us from generation to generation, so you can imagine the spookiness. Maybe you can't, I don't know. But essentially, we have good, tricky, and sort of negative spirits. Werewolves are said to be little people who just mess with you, I guess. Little shadows you might see darting around the room super fast. And other spirits who've been known to show their victims their melting face, in dire times usually, seems to all serve a purpose. So I'm not going to lie and say I'm a skeptic, because there's too much weird shit in this world that it's just obvious. Oh, anyways, I didn't really get the vibe that one spirit visited the house. It felt like several, coming and going over the years. Never really felt evil or anything, but I guess over time it was a little bit of a nuisance. Chairs would move on their own, stuff would fall in the night, the usual shit that I tend to justify with common explainable things. But one experience was not explainable at all, and it was when I was 14 or 15. My room was in the basement technically, but it was more of a split level type house with the kitchen, living room, and bedrooms upstairs. And my room, along with like 5 other rooms downstairs. It's the common cookie cutter house you see on any res, but it was fairly large. I remember I was burning sage and sweet grass earlier that evening, as that is a big thing in our culture to cleanse and keep good energy. Some people say that sweet grass can bring about positive and negative spirits, but I really can't attest to how true that is. So I was dozing off with my little lamp on, but it was dead quiet. TV wasn't on for some reason, and all of a sudden I woke up alert as fuck. As soon as I came to, I seen my bedroom door start opening very slowly. I was like, what the fuck? And kind of scanned the room, but my focus was immediately shifted back to the door. It felt like someone was coming into my room. I fucking froze as I felt that spirit walk right up to the side of my bed. I was definitely spooked, but as I gained my courage, I looked around my room again, trying to rationalize this shit. But my window was closed, And in the middle of night, our doors were all locked and there was no draft. I mean, there was no explanation. It's like a sixth sense, the same way animals react. Anyways, I feel like this is getting too long, so I'll just add that I feel like one of the spirits would mimic my family. Maybe more than one, I don't know. But one night was older and pregnant. I woke up to what sounded like a demonic version of my mom yelling my name. That shit definitely scarred me. So eventually, I moved out of my mama's house. Many years go by with no activity. Cut to January 2022. My husband and kids are sleeping. I knew this because my kids are on the couches next to me, and my husband said he was going to lay down because he wasn't feeling well. I'm working on drawing and opening YouTube, and I forget to start a video. And if I recall correctly, the first 10 seconds of a video plays when you're just browsing. So that had happened, and now it was just on the main page on my TV. I sat there for maybe 20 minutes in utter silence, despite our heater, and out of the fucking complete silence I hear Brooke, my name, clear as fucking day. So I fucking scream bloody murder and immediately yell back, "What?" I was genuinely scared and sincerely pissed, thinking my husband was trying to scare me. But the thing was that the voice came from very close to me in the kitchen, not even 10 feet away. And the voice sounded exactly like my own, as if I was trying to sound masculine. Like it was deliberately trying to scare me. I stood and yelled again for my husband, but no answer. I looked at my kids to see if they were up or talking in their sleep, as they often do that, but no. I got up and walked to the back of our house to where my husband was on the bed, sound asleep. I woke him up and asked him if he was messing with me, but he was genuinely sick and said he was pissed out the whole time. Man, that shit shook me up. But oh well, I guess. I mean, what else can you say? The most we'll ever know about other realms will come when we pass on. Until I think there's no explanation. I'm not looking for answers or anything, and if you don't believe, it's cool. I understand. I've had many dogs, all of which were wonderful. But I think for most people, there is one dog that was the special one. For me, that was my Dachshund Hunter. He was amazing. Sweet, smart, loved everyone, and just a joy to have in my life. He died at the somewhat young age, for a doxy, of 10 years of congestive heart failure. Needless to say, I was devastated. Especially as they had told me when he first got diagnosed that he had up to 2 years to live if I took good care of him and he took his medications. Even though I was diligent with his care and he didn't even look sick at this point, he passed away after only 3 months. In an attempt to cope with my grief, I signed up to be a foster for a local rescue group. I was by no means ready to adopt another dog, but I thought perhaps it would help me to heal to help a rescue dog, while at the same time I could help get a dog ready for its forever home or adoption. The first couple of weeks or so with my foster were uneventful, and my foster dog turned out to be a very sweet, well-behaved little guy. At first I crated him, then let him sleep on a bed next to my bed, and then eventually he was sleeping on the bed with me, like my hunter had in the past. One night in the middle of the night when I was dead asleep with my foster dog on the bed with me, I felt a dog jump off my bed in the lower right corner. I assumed it was my foster, but right after it happened, I felt my foster, who was lying against my left side, lunge towards the spot where the jumping had occurred, implying he felt it too. I grabbed my foster dog in mid-lunge and held on tightly with my eyes closed in fear, now realizing that it wasn't him who jumped off the bed. The next morning, after finally falling asleep again, hugging my foster all night and in daylight, I searched the entire room and closet for anything that might have caused what we both felt the night before. There was nothing on the floor, nothing anywhere near the bed, nothing at all in the room that would explain it. I sleep with the door to my bedroom closed and locked. I live alone. And while I do have a sliding glass door in the bedroom leading to a small outdoor patio, I rarely go out there, and the sliding glass door is locked with a deadbolt at top. I ended up searching the entire condo and found absolutely nothing. My foster dog, who also never reacted to anything, And if you know Dachshunds, they are hunting dogs with great noses and will find anything hiding in your house. My initial reaction that it was the foster dog jumping off the bed came from that when Hunter was alive. There were a few times he had jumped off the bed in the middle of the night from that exact location. I remember the times because Dachshunds are not supposed to jump because of their back issues, and I would always scold him for doing it. Plus, it would wake me up like it did this time. To be honest, it was too heavy of a jump to be anything smaller than a dog, as it was the exact force of when Hunter would do it, and from the same spot on the bed. I might have even been willing to chalk it up to a very vivid dream if not for my foster's dog reaction. He literally lunged at the spot right after it happened, so we felt it enough to wake him up and have him react to it. I truly believe Hunter came back to visit me, but not 100% sure why. To see what my new foster dog looked like? Or to tell me he was not happy I had another dog in his bed? My foster went on to get adopted by a wonderful couple who I handpicked, and I didn't adopt another dog for another 2 years. I never had another incident like this again, but I did see a pet medium at a street fair one time and thought, what the heck, it's only $20. He told me that Hunter has been trying to get back to me since he left, and that he watches me over me. Grain of salt, but who knows? I still remember Hunter and think of him almost daily. This story happened about 5 or 6 years ago with a girl I was dating. I've always been sensitive to the paranormal. As a kid, I used to see shadow figures in my childhood home. And from a kid till about 19, I had experiences around that house in my aunt's house, who lived right behind us, and the land was connected. So yeah, they travelled frequently. But anyway, I went to high school with this girl, and always had a bit of a crush on her, but our paths never really crossed. But fast forward to 2014, we linked up, and it was magical at first. We spent so much time together it was insane, and we talked about everything, including the paranormal. I shared stories she shared, including her telling me that she was being haunted by an entity. Like, I firmly believe in and have had so many experiences with the paranormal, but I didn't think it was that serious. Boy, was I wrong. It started off subtly, when me and her would spend time together and we would lose time, which is a no-no when it comes to the paranormal. Once we took a nap holding each other, and when we woke up, we were so sore. Running like 3 marathons sore. Later that same week, she was about to leave my house like normal. I had opened the door for her, and we were saying a final goodbye, and something slammed the door. Keep in mind, no one was home but us, and we were in the middle of the room making out as you do, and no one was outside. I lived in an apartment complex, top apartment. Our neighbours had moved out 3 weeks prior, so no one lived next to us, and it was the middle of a school day, so all the kids around there were in school. Besides that, there was nothing thrown at the door, and if someone did it and ran, we would have seen them. So continuing, the next incident happened at her house. We were getting a bit frisky. Her idea, I swear. But anyways, we were doing our thing, and I felt uneasy, like someone was watching us. But she stayed in the middle of nowhere, and it was like 2 a.m. Well, as we were holding each other, I asked her, was it here? She said yes, and pointed to the corner of the room. And she said it appeared as soon as you came into the room. My skin was crawling after she said that. Later that night or morning when I was about to leave, we were sitting in my car talking, and she fell asleep while I was holding her. She was only asleep for maybe 3 minutes or so before she snapped awake and said it's angry. And I swear to God, Courtney, this huge shadow figure came walking by my driver's side window. I'm 6'3". This thing would have towered over me. And do you know how when you're sitting in a turning lane waiting for the light to change and let you turn, and like a semi drives by you and your car shakes from the G-force? Well, as the entity went by my car, it felt just like that. The next incident, we were about to go out to a bar with her best friend and her boyfriend. I had just gotten off work and had to come home and shower and change before we could go. Well, they picked me up at work, which was in a different town and county than where I live. But when we pulled into my apartment complex, that shadow figure was waiting as we turned in. And before someone says maybe you were just seeing things, the driver, which was the boyfriend of my girlfriend's best friend, said, "There goes the ghost." We were all very shaken because we were just in a whole other country. And here it is, just waiting for her at my house. The last incident was the last paranormal thing to happen before we broke up. Her ex upset her really badly one night. Continuing on it was storming really bad. I was pleading with her just to come over and stay the night at my house. She finally complied and she came over. It was like 12 a.m. at this point. We ate some junk food, watched a movie, and fell asleep. I wasn't awake for this. She told me that at some point, she said she heard tapping on my bedroom door and a voice which sounded like her mom telling her to come out of the room. Now her mom is 1, didn't know where I lived, and 2, she was in Ohio visiting a sick relative now. Oh, by the way, we were in Florida. So assuming that my girlfriend told her mom where I lived and also lied about her being out of state, and also gave her a key to my house somehow, well, she just made this whole thing up, which I also don't know why she would. We weren't even talking about the entity that night.